In their quiet Boston apartment, Sarah carefully tucked a silk dress into her suitcase while David double-checked their passports. After 4 years of relentless saving, their dream anniversary trip to the Amalfi Coast was finally real. Then, a sharp ringtone shattered the silence. It was Sarah's mother. There was no hello, only a cold command. Cancel your trip. Jennifer has a situation, and she needs you to watch the kids all week. Sarah froze, her fingers tightening around the hotel confirmation, a symbol of every sacrificed dinner and extra shift. Her mother's voice hardened. Family comes first, Sarah. Don't let me down. The weight of 1,000 past favors pressed against her chest. If you were in Sarah's shoes, caught between a dream vacation you earned and the crushing weight of family guilt, what would you do? Drop a comment with go or stay below. I want to hear your take. Mintat minsan and sai and stay the bar. Before Sarah could even process her mother's demand, her phone buzzed with a text from her father. It was in all caps, vibrating with authority. Don't be selfish. Family first. Cancel your trip now. The sheer entitlement of the message felt like a physical blow. Suddenly, her phone became a weapon of constant interruptions. Notifications flooded in, a grocery list for the kids, a strict schedule for soccer practice, allergy medication dosages, and even screen time rules. They weren't asking. They were assigning her a role she hadn't auditioned for, treating her life like a blank space they had the right to fill. Sarah looked across the room at David. He remained quiet, giving her the space to breathe, but his eyes were steady and filled with a fierce, protective calm. In his gaze, she saw the truth. Their marriage, their hard work, and their joy actually mattered. He wasn't going to let her fold out of habit, and for the first time, she didn't want to. With a trembling hand, Sarah picked up the phone. Her mother was still talking, listing off chores as if the matter was settled. Sarah took a deep, grounding breath, cutting through the noise with a single, sharp word. No. Silence fell on the other end, heavy and shocked. No, she repeated, her voice gaining strength. We are going to Italy. As she hung up, a chilling clarity washed over her. She finally realized that to her family, her happiness wasn't a priority. It was just a convenience they were willing to sacrifice. When the shouting didn't work, Sarah's mother pivoted to a tactic that was far more lethal, a calculated, maternal softness. Honey, she cooed, her voice dripping with artificial concern. Don't make this ugly. We're just asking for a little help. And now, Arsali, Bertsteingmar. Sarah nearly recoiled. That specific softness had been the soundtrack of her life, usually preceding a massive sacrifice on her part. Flashes of the last decade blurred through her mind. She remembered spending her weekends sorting out Jennifer's insurance after a reckless fender bender. She remembered the 6 months she spent as a free nanny because Jennifer couldn't afford daycare, while Sarah quietly put her own career goals on the back burner. In this family, you were a saint as long as you were a doormat, but the second you stood upright, they branded you cold-blooded. Then came the voice memo from Jennifer, breathless, dramatic, and sharp. Sarah, I have mandatory leadership training. If I miss this, my promotion is gone. Do you really want that on your conscience? Do you want the kids to think their aunt chose a beach over them? Anarsteins Garkurisals, Hai True. Sarah stood by her suitcase, feeling the familiar tug of guilt, but then she recalled a vital lesson from her therapist. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always interpret your boundaries as a betrayal. They didn't love her helpfulness, they loved her lack of a no. And neither orsaitanskari hanan sai mo. This time, the Saint Sarah persona was officially retired. At 5:10 a.m., Boston's Logan Airport was draped in a thick, gray mist. Sarah walked through the terminal, the rhythmic click-clack of her suitcase wheels echoing against the polished stone floor. While most travelers were dreaming of their destinations, Sarah felt like a fugitive. Her phone was a glowing beacon of hostility in her palm, lighting up every few seconds with vitriolic texts and missed calls. Each vibration sent a sharp jolt of anxiety through her chest, a physical reminder of the bridge she was currently burning. David noticed her trembling hands. He stopped near the security line, gently taking her phone and tucking it into her bag. He then placed her boarding pass firmly in her hand, leaning in to catch her gaze. 4 years, Sarah, he whispered softly. We worked for this. We earned this. It's finally time to live for yourself. In that moment, Sarah made a choice. She didn't turn the phone off. She needed it for the trip, but she went into the settings and silenced every single notification from her family. It was a quiet, digital surgery, severing the invisible strings they had used to pull her back for decades. As the plane finally accelerated down the runway and lifted into the clouds, Sarah watched the Boston skyline shrink into a cluster of tiny lights. She knew that back home, the fuse she had lit was already burning toward a massive explosion. But as the fasten seatbelt sign flicked off, she leaned her head back and took a deep, shaky breath. For the first time in years, she felt like she could actually breathe. The moment the plane's tires touched the tarmac in Italy, Sarah's phone erupted. It was a digital avalanche, 57 missed calls, dozens of frantic texts, and a family group chat that had been ominously renamed to "Sarah Needs to Answer." The sheer volume of the notification pings felt like an assault, a desperate attempt to drag her back across the ocean before she even stepped off the aircraft. As they waited at the luggage carousel, Sarah opened her inbox to find a stray email Jennifer had accidentally forwarded weeks ago while asking for help with a different crisis. Her blood ran cold as she read the dates. The leadership training Jennifer claimed was a last-minute emergency had actually been confirmed on her calendar for 6 weeks. This wasn't a sudden catastrophe or a stroke of bad luck. It was a cold, calculated move. Jennifer hadn't even bothered to look for a professional nanny or ask the in-laws because she was 100% certain she could simply command Sarah to destroy her own life on 12 hours' notice. They hadn't been asking for a favor, they were banking on her submission. In that instant, the last lingering shred of Sarah's guilt evaporated, replaced by a crystalline, unshakable resolve. She wasn't a difficult daughter or a selfish sister. She was an adult who had finally stopped being an emergency exit for people who refused to plan. It turns out the emergency was nothing but a lie to exploit her time. Have you ever caught a family member or friend in a blatant lie just so they could use you? Share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that saying no to manipulation is a superpower. While sitting in a sun-drenched cafe in Italy, Sarah watched her phone screen flicker with one final ultimatum from her father. Don't expect this family to be here for you when you actually need us. It was the ultimate threat in their household, the promise of total exile. Soon, the extended family joined the fray. Relatives who hadn't spoken to her in months began lecturing her about the importance of being a supportive sister, painting Jennifer as a struggling single mother, despite the fact that Jennifer's husband was simply away on a short business trip. The guilt-tripping was relentless, designed to shame her back into submission. But Sarah, looking out at the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean, realized she was no longer afraid of their judgment. She pulled up the forwarded email she had discovered, the one proving Jennifer had known about her training schedule for over a month. With a steady hand, Sarah typed a single, clear message into the group chat. For the record, Jennifer knew about this training for 6 weeks. I am not anyone's free, last-minute backup plan. I love my nieces and nephews, but my life is not an emergency exit for other people's lack of planning. She hit send and attached the screenshot of the email, providing the receipts that shattered their narrative. Without waiting for a reply, she placed her phone face down on the table. As she took her first real sip of a rich Italian espresso, the bitterness of the coffee was nothing compared to the sweetness of finally telling the truth. Perched on a balcony, overlooking the breathtaking Amalfi Coast, Sarah didn't spend her afternoon checking for apologies. Instead, she opened her notes app and began a list titled, "Things I Am No Longer Doing." It was her personal declaration of independence. The entries were simple but revolutionary. No more unpaid childcare with less than 2 weeks' notice. No more covering Jennifer's emergency credit card bills. Most importantly, she promised herself she would stop apologizing for having a happy marriage and a life of her own. She was finished mistaking disrespect for family loyalty. In her family, love was always measured by how much of herself she could erase to make room for them. That ended today. Before heading to dinner, Sarah pulled out the silk blue dress she had bought months ago. She had originally hesitated to pack it, fearing her family would call her showy or accuse her of trying to outshine Jennifer. But tonight, she zipped it up with a sense of quiet triumph. When she looked in the mirror, the woman staring back still looked tired from years of overextending herself, but her eyes held a new, unshakable clarity. For the first time in her adult life, she didn't feel like a helper or a disappointment. She felt like an individual. She finally understood that a boundary isn't a wall built to keep people out. It's a door with a lock, and she was finally the one holding the key to her own peace. The peace of the Italian countryside was suddenly punctured by a call from an unrecognized number. Sarah answered, only to hear her mother's voice, sharp and trembling with dramatic flair. You've sent my blood pressure through the roof, Sarah. Is that what you want? To be the reason your own mother ends up in the hospital? So, it was the ultimate emotional weapon, the health card, designed to trigger the old, submissive Sarah. When the guilt trip failed to elicit an immediate apology, her mother moved to the family's nuclear option, social exile. Your father and I have decided. If you can't be bothered to help this family when it counts, don't bother showing up for Christmas. You and David are officially uninvited. In their circle, being cut from the holiday dinner was the ultimate public shaming, a Black Christmas meant to force her into a groveling retreat. But Sarah didn't beg. She stood on a trail lined with ancient pines, looking at the vast horizon, and spoke with a calm she didn't know she possessed. Mom, if the price of admission to Christmas dinner is total obedience, then I'd rather just make a reservation at a restaurant. The line went dead with a sharp click. Sarah's hands began to shake, not from regret, but from the sheer adrenaline of finally standing her ground. David walked over and held her silently while she cried, letting the years of bottled-up pressure finally escape. As the shaking subsided, the fear was gone, replaced by a profound, unshakable serenity. In the middle of a candlelit dinner in Positano, Sarah's phone buzzed on the table. It wasn't a text this time, but a notification from her banking app. Scheduled transfer of $450 to Jennifer Miller failed due to insufficient funds in the designated sub-account. Sarah stared at the screen, a wave of realization hitting her harder than any of her mother's insults. She had been feeding her sister's lifestyle for nearly 3 years under the guise of temporary help for daycare or groceries. She had forgotten the recurring transfer was even active, a quiet monthly tax she paid just to keep the peace. Right there, between the appetizers and the main course, Sarah opened her banking app. With a steady finger, she didn't just fix the transfer, she deleted it. Then, she went further. She scrolled through her saved payees and systematically removed the templates for her father's utility backup and her mother's emergency fund. Each tap on the delete button felt like unhooking a heavy iron chain from her skin. She wasn't being cruel, she was simply stopping the subsidization of her own disrespect. Moments later, a text from her mother popped up, likely seeing a notification of the change. Since you want to act so independent, don't expect a dime of help from us ever again. Sarah didn't argue. She didn't explain that she hadn't asked for their money in a decade. She simply typed 2 words, understood, received. She set the phone down, took a sip of her wine, and realized the family ATM was officially out of service. Returning to Boston, there was no grand confrontation, only a chilling silence from her family. Sarah, however, found she no longer craved their noise. A week later, Jennifer called, sobbing because she had been passed over for her promotion. Are you happy now? She hissed. You destroyed my future. Sarah remained remarkably calm, her voice steady as she replied, I didn't destroy anything, Jennifer. Your own lack of planning did. I just stopped being the one to pay for it. That Thanksgiving, Sarah hosted her own dinner. Her home was filled with laughter and friends who truly valued her, not just what she could do for them. She realized the ultimate lesson. A boundary isn't a wall built out of hate, it's a door with a lock, and she finally decided who earned the key.